My name is Alan Cohen, and this is the Quarantine Interviews. I like to say we've slowly been getting out of quarantine. We're not in that strict time, so things have changed. Slowly, people are going back to work. I just heard that this week or beginning of the week that the restaurants are opening here in New Jersey. The beaches are opening up. But yet we still have to be very careful because this deadly disease that attacked the human race is still with us. I still hear terrible stories where people think it's okay and then somebody passes away because they flew on a plane to visit their children from the other state. So still we must be really careful of what we're doing. It's the worst time in human history right now. So I like to say these quarantine interviews that I've been doing up until now have been great for me to meet new musicians, some of my old friends, and it really kept us all in contact. And we need to stay together as a community in the music industry, also in any industry that we have to stay together and work hard. Things have changed. Well, first thing is I shaved off my quarantine beard. So some of you that are seeing this is the first interview that I've done in about a month. I thought I wouldn't go back and do it, but we've gotten such a positive response from all these great musicians and the talent that I was lucky enough to interview that I said I still have to do it because people want to know their stories. Today I have an exceptional guest for you today. His history and his career is outstanding. He's played with such people as John Bon Jovi, Aretha Franklin, Mary J. Blige. He played in Broadway shows such as Mamma Mia, Saturday Night Live. The list continues. He'll tell us about it. Most notably that he's noted for is for playing with one of our all-time great talents in the world, Sting. He was Sting's guitarist during 1987 to 88. He'll tell us the exact dates. And really, that has to be a highlight of anybody's gig. He also has a book out that he'll tell us about and promote. Ladies and gentlemen, his name is Jeffrey Lee Campbell. I'd like to welcome you, Jeff. How are you today?
I'm good, Alan. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. It's really great to see you. We just got acquainted. I know your career for a long time. We know a lot of the same friends from the Broadway scene, but it's really great to see you here for this interview. So there you are. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
So tell us a little bit, where would you like to start? I know you want to really promote this book. It's called Don't Stand So Close to Me.
Let me correct you.
Yes.
Stand so close to me. Sting's song is Don't Stand So Close. I don't play on words to do stand so close, which doesn't work so well in the physical distancing times of coronavirus. But yeah, I figured I named it that because I was 10 feet away from Sting every night for a year, so.
That's incredible. I mean, we could start there because that's the most exciting story I've heard yet. So tell us a little bit about that. You want to tell us about the book first or actually about the tour or how you got it?
The book is called Do Stand So Close, My Improbable Adventure as Sting's Guitarist. It is available on Amazon. It's a paperback, ebook. I just did an audiobook last year, so you could get the audiobook on Audible or Amazon or iTunes. It's me narrating the book. The book it's really written as a journal kind of my year on the road with Sting. It's a brief intro about how I moved to New York, how I got the gig. People used to always say, how did you come to New York and get the gig with Sting? I was a complete unknown. Amazingly, I had only been in New York 8 months when Sting hired me. And it's such a crazy, the stars aligning to allow me to end up on that gig. It was just, complete unknown playing with Sting. And I always tell people when I moved to New York, I'm from North Carolina originally. And I said, you know what? I had a college buddy from University of Miami that lived in New York. He said, come visit me. So I came up and visited and fell in love with the city. And I said, you know, I went back to North Carolina. My band had fallen apart. So I saved up some money and moved to New York. And I said, I'm going to give it a year and see what happens. And then I figured I'd go back to North Carolina. And miraculously, on the eve of my 1-year anniversary, I find myself at Madison Square Garden playing with Sting. So I was like, wow, it's been a pretty good year. So
you mentioned you were selling candy at one of the theaters.
Well, when I came to New York to try to be a musician, I mean, I couldn't even find club dates to play. And, you know, I was spending, my money was, you know, bleeding out. And so a friend of mine worked on Broadway for the concession company at all the Nederlander theaters. Yeah. So she got me a job selling candy. So my first real job in New York was selling candy. I was working at Starlight Express at the Gershwin, and Me and My Girl at the Marquee. Yeah. Dances at the what was the 46th Street Theater at the time, then became Richard Rodgers, but yeah. La Cage aux Folles at the Palace. I was selling candy, and I thought it was exciting to me to even be in those theaters as a candy salesman. Right,
right. So you must have been Jones, and hey, let me get into that auction. I was at the Nederland. You mentioned the Nederland Theater. I was doing Sugar Babies.
Right.
I did Sugar Baby in the Nederland Theater over there.
Well, it's not lost on me that I sold candy in what is now the Richard Rodgers Theater.
Yeah.
And then how many years later? 14 years later, I was playing Seussical in that same theater. So, you know, I'd worked my way from the back of the theater selling cheap champagne and candy, overpriced candy, to I made it to the orchestra pit. So, I mean, but with a year around the world with Sting sandwiched in between. So, yeah, my first job was selling candy on Broadway. And I like to point out to people, amazingly, one of my coworkers was Aaron Sorkin, and he was writing A Few Good Men at the time.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, he's gone on to do The West Wing, and, you know,
yeah.
But Aaron was selling candy like everybody else. And the thought of him being there side by side with me, and then, wow, nice career he's had.
Incredible. So, okay, so you were selling candy at the time. So how did you get the call to, you know, audition for Sting?
Well, and again, the book covers it, and I'll try to be concise here because it is kind of a convoluted thing. What had happened was when I came to town, I asked a friend if he knew anybody that needed a guitar player, and he called a few people, and he found a keyboard player a friend of his named Delmar Brown. Mm. And Delmar, he was the synthesis in the Gil Evans Orchestra.
Yeah.
He also had
days too. He was with me in Berkeley.
Yeah. Oh, so you know Delmar?
Yeah, yeah.
So Delmar also had a band called Bush Rock. That was his personal band. So he was looking for a guitar player. It was the summertime was coming up, and Gil Evans was doing all the jazz festivals in Europe. And so Delmar had gotten a budget, so he wanted to take Bush Rock along and kind of piggyback to where Gil was going. And so I auditioned for Bush Rock, did not get the gig. So you talk about, you know, the things that are out of your control when it comes to being successful. You know, you just, you know,
yeah.
As I was saying in my book, luck is when opportunity meets preparation. And an opportunity came in that I auditioned for Delmar's band, did not get the gig. But then the guy that did get the gig quit. So I get a phone call from Delmar, already in Paris, saying, jump on a plane and come to, I didn't even have a passport at that point. Hmm. And so I quit my candy job, flew to Europe to meet Delmar. And, you know, the synchronicity, no pun intended, that's going on at the point.
I don't mean to interrupt you, just hearing that. So I quit my candy job.
Yeah.
It's a funny expression, man.
And I had never been off the eastern seaboard of the United States. So all of a sudden I'm in Paris. And what was happening alongside of this is Sting was working on his second album, Nothing Like the Sun, or had made his second album, Nothing Like the Sun. And he did a cover of Little Wing, the Jimi Hendrix tune. And he used Gil Evans' arrangement. Oh. So the Gil Evans Orchestra played on the album. So at the Umbria Jazz Festival, Sting and Gil Evans Orchestra were doing a big concert. So by the time we get to Perugia, and I'm playing in Delmar's band. Sting and Gill are doing a big concert at the soccer stadium, but Delmar gets us a gig at this little dive bar in town. So we play this gig, and then I hear that Sting was in the audience. So now, things are moving. So, but the tour falls apart, the money gets funny, tour falls apart. I come back to New York and go back to selling candy. And 2 months later, I get a phone call from Delmar. He said, "Hey, Sting's looking for a guitar player, and he asked me about you." And then, boom, the big bang happened.
He actually heard you playing before.
Sting heard me play with Delmar's band Bush Rock in Italy.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so I guess it's stuck in his head.
Yeah.
And as I joke in my book, because the previous tour Sting had done was the Dream of the Blue Turtles.
Yes.
And it was Omar Hakim, Daryl Jones, Branford Marsalis, and Kenny Kirkland. All stars.
Yeah.
Huge stars in their own right. And so I joked that Sting was tired of working with a bunch of self-assured somebodies, so he hired a nobody. So he decided to, I guess, spread it out a little bit, because after dealing with some of the powerful sidemen, I think it opened up a door for me to come in. People say, "Why would he hire you?" I'm like, I don't know. Maybe he just wanted somebody that was just happy to be there at that point. You know what I mean? So Sting, I auditioned for Sting, and I went in one day, and I thought, okay, well, there it was, and then I get a call the next day, "Can you come back?" And it was at SIR Studios down on 25th Street. And so he keeps calling at the end of every day, and it's not a cattle call. It's just us sitting in a room at SIR with a band playing.
Yeah, let me ask you a question, because I listened to a little bit of the audio tape of the book. It says you went in there first, and then you guys were just jamming, waiting for Sting. Sting came in, and then he just started calling out tunes, and you kind of knew every tune.
Well, I say this I'm not being self-deprecating. I say this to people all the time, and they roll their eyes. It's like, I've been around some really talented people. I've seen some talented. I'm not that talented, so I over-prepare. I work really hard. I study because, people say to me, "What do you mean you're not talented? You're in New York. You're on Broadway. You played with Sting." And I always say to them, just because you're on the Yankees, that does not make you Mickey Mantle. Just because you're on the Chicago Bulls, that does not make you Michael Jordan. There are Michael Jordans among us here, and you and I have both seen those kind of players that just go, our mouth hangs open. So my point being is, I'm very aware of the level of talent around me. So preparation is kind of my superpower. I really prepare. So I really did my studying in the week that I had before the audition to learn just every song I could by the Police and Sting.
Right. Well, that's a great tip for our viewers right now of how to get a great gig.
Sure.
Is to over prepare. You can never be over prepared, because your nerves, the environment, distractions. If you're over prepared, you could still do a great job. If you're under prepared and then you get the distractions, you might flub the whole show, the whole audition. So great tip for
along those lines, I would always, when I was teaching, and I would tell my students, because I'd learned this the hard way through music school and auditions, it's like, try to practice scared, because you're going to be scared at the audition or the gig,
Right.
So you have to kind of simulate the adrenaline while you're preparing, because it's going to be there when the chips are down.
Right.
I remember, to digress a bit, I saw a guy talking one time about when he would go to the shooting range to practice shooting his gun. He said, "I always did 20 push-ups before I did target practice," because he said, when you need the gun in a real situation, your heart's going to be pounding. And it's the same with playing an audition or a Broadway show. Your heart's pounding. You better get used to that. So I over-prepare, and I really hyper-focus when I prepare, too.
Great. So then he started calling out tunes or something like that? And
he kept calling tunes, and the other people in the room, God bless them, where, they're like, "I don't know that one. I don't know that one." They weren't as obsessive as I was. And I just kept saying, "Yeah, I know that one." And he eventually turned to me and smiled, and he said, "Okay, Jeff, stop showing off." And I thought, uh-oh.
Right.
But it made an impression, and he called me back. And then 4 days later, he hired me. So
that's incredible. So what happened? How did it go from there? So now you officially got the gig. You went immediately. You said Madison Square Garden, or where'd you go first?
Well, we did a few gigs around town, including Saturday Night Live, which was the season premiere.
Sure.
There's a whole section in my book about that. And again, the book it reads like a journal, actually. You can open it to the middle of the book and it say August 25th, Paris, France. It's more like a daily diary almost of that year. So you can read it in bite-sized chunks. You know, it's not like these long chapters where you're looking like, where's the end of this chapter? It's really like 1 and 2 page anecdotes from the tour based on the itineraries left over from the tour. But we did a few gigs in town, but Saturday Night Live, which was amazing. And, you know, the thing that made that, again, we were going to play We'll Be Together and Be Still My Beating Heart, which were the 2 singles off of that album.
Such great songs, incredible songs.
Then one day we go through Little Wing, the Jimi Hendrix tune, and just, you know, blow the roof off of SIR. And so after we finish, Sting says, hey guys, can we get that down to 4 minutes? Because Saturday Night Live, you have to do a 4-minute version of everything. We thought he was kidding. He was not kidding. He canned Be Still My Beating Heart, added Little Wing. So I went from being just a side man to having a featured solo, which, you know, people check out my website, jeffreyleecampbell.com. There's a lot of videos on there, including the Saturday Night Live performance. But the thing you don't see on the performance is Hiram Bullock, who had played guitar on the record with Gil Evans, was sitting in the front row in the audience like this, you know, staring at me. And I'm going, I can't, because Hiram was one of my favorite guitarists.
May you rest in peace, man.
So I'm going, 2 weeks ago, I was selling Twizzlers at the Gershwin Theater. Now I'm on stage with Sting, Steve Martin, and Hiram Bullock staring me down, you know. So things can happen fast in New York. We were discussing earlier, the quote in the front of my book from E.B. White, the author, says, no one should move to New York unless he's willing to be lucky. I am the poster child for that, because I went from selling candy to being on Saturday Night Live 2 weeks later. Then a month later, we started out in Rio de Janeiro to 250,000 people in a soccer stadium.
Incredible.
So my head is spinning at this point.
Yeah.
And then we spent a year.
I mean, that whole album is a great album. It has some of the best songs on there. Like you said, Be Still My Beating Heart, We'll Be Together was great. Englishman in New York. I remember when that came out, it was like, what is he saying? I'm an alien. I'm illegal. Well, you know, what was he saying? I mean, you know, I guess myself and you, I mean, Sting really revolutionized, you know, that sound of music. But then he really put together so many other styles that he wanted to diversify and really put world music together. So first with his reggae style, of course, with the Police and rock, to really this new sound with soprano sax, the percussion, really incredible. And also Fragile is one of my favorite songs. Every time you hear it, it's a song that gives you the chills. That's
a great tune. And it was funny, I got an email from somebody in Belgium the other day. And he was talking about, he said, you know, he's a few years younger. He said, Nothing Like the Sun's kind of a blank spot for me. He said, I remember Englishman in New York. And I said to him, I said, yeah, when we played that tune, I always thought that was kind of the novelty tune from the record, but it's still on Sting's set list here 30 years later. So you never know which one's going to be the hit. And that became the hit, which, by the way, I'm in the music video for that, which is also on my website.
I have to go back and see it.
In a New York video, we shot it at an empty restaurant down on Broadway and Bleecker Street on a snowy day in January, in between our South American leg and our first American leg. So, but to me, to watch that video and see me in the same room with Kenny Kirkland and Branford Marsalis, Nino Sinalou was playing drums in the video, but he had played with Weather Report and Miles Davis. I mean, I was surrounded. I heard a rapper say one time, your idols become your rivals. I don't know if they became my rivals, but my peers.
Yeah.
I mean, I went from a year earlier watching Sting's documentary of Bring On the Night about the Blue Turtles tour, sitting in a movie theater in North Carolina with my mouth hanging open, looking at Branford and Kenny and Daryl. Then I ended up meeting all these guys and working with these guys.
Yeah.
And it was just, an amazing thing. But yeah, and Nothing Like Sun is a great record, and Sting was always blending different styles. And
Yeah, I mean, even till today, you know, writing the Broadway show, and
I thought The Last Ship was great. You know, people hated it, but I was like, I thought musically it was just wonderful.
yeah, I mean, so give us a little insight. I'm sure everybody like to know, what's it really like hanging with Sting? Did you hang a lot, or really, excuse me, he kept his star status and kind of away from the band? And
That's,
you know,
and again,
what's it really like being on the road with Sting?
And again, and I say this, I sound like I'm, you know, to beat the dead horse. It's all in the book, really in detail. And people write me and say, it's such a fun, breezy read. I felt like I was on tour with you. I read the book in 2 days. I couldn't put it down. So I tried to write, I kept joking with my wife, I don't want to write an eye roller. I want to write a page turner. Because, you know, some books I read, I go, who cares that your grandfather was a milkman in World War I, you know? So my book is bang, bang, bang. Here's what it's like being on the road with these stars playing these giant stadiums. And, but as I say, Sting, as rock stars go, I thought was a very nice guy. He was very generous, and for better or worse, but he had to be that way because Branford Marsalis and Kenny Kirkland are going to be respected, you know, or they won't do the gig. So Sting treated the band as peers. He let us shine. He let us stretch out. I mean, I go back and look at footage from the tour, and compared to today's concerts, it looks like I'm watching a jazz thing because there was so much stretching out and fun. And, you know, now everything is so choreographed to the lights and the click and everything. So yeah. Sting was a very nice guy. We played tennis together all the time, hung out together. There's tons of stories of us hanging out, and he was totally accessible. It was hard for me being a huge Police fan. I remained starstruck the whole tour. I tried to act, I address it in the book about, you know, band leaders want you to be like a peer. They don't want you to be starstruck. So it's a challenge to go in there and pretend like you're used to hanging out with the guy that you idolized for the previous 10 years. So
well, you got to realize, I mean, obviously he picked you, he handpicked you. Yeah. For this particular tour. Yeah. So he does respect you. He does respect all those top names you just talked about. So he also wants to, you know, be at that level where he merges the music, and it's not just, you know, the star up front, Engelbert Humperdinck, and he's got a whole band in the back. He still wants it to be a band situation, I would imagine. Yeah, just like the Police, he's working with his two greatest buddies playing, right?
In the book, you know, when we crossed paths with Michael Jackson's band, Michael was in another hotel and the band was in a separate hotel. Right. Sting, we always stayed side by side in whatever hotel he was in, we were in.
That's incredible. Now, I know he's a big yoga guy that does a lot of yoga. He used to do tons of yoga back in the 80s, but he was still doing, was he, you know, keeping very natural during the tour? Was he still doing that kind of stuff?
There was definitely two wings of the band, the party side and the healthy side. Unfortunately, I fell on the party side, and the book addresses a lot of that. And, you know, what's interesting about my story is very Shakespearean because I go up and down the ladder of success. Because I come back after the tour thinking, okay, I've figured this out. And I ended up playing a lot of club dates in the Bronx after playing Madison Square Garden with Sting. So I kind of got it backwards, but you know, you have to take it where you can get it. And I address that in the book, dealing with the fallout afterwards. And I talk about, I probably partied too much and that, but no, Sting was very healthy. You know, he takes his shirt off every night during Don't Stand So Close to Me. So he's totally ripped and the crowd goes crazy. And it's funny because I talked about, you know, he had a strict regimen of yoga. And then some fan writes me and says, Sting didn't start doing yoga till 1991. I'm like, you know, they're picking apart my book. And I was like, I don't know. I didn't work out with him. I thought he was doing yoga in the 80s. But yeah, he was very healthy, very, you know, he took good care of himself.
Yeah, I guess that's a dichotomy between two different types of stars. A guy like Sting, you know, obviously it's all rock and roll, and then he goes into, you know, this jazz thing. But he always came across as that healthy, to rip your shirt off and be that fit. I mean, even a guy like Mick Jagger, who, you know, parties or whatever, but to have that stamina on stage, like a Sting, like a Mick Jagger, that's a lot of energy. You have to be one of the healthiest or fit to be able to knock out a 2-hour, concert in front of that many people and be able to do it more than one night in a row. I mean,
the thing I tell people is so funny because the Nothing Like the Sun tour, we did 181 concerts in a year. Wow. So that's a little over 3 a week. I talk to people now, they say, oh yeah, we got a big tour coming up, 40 dates. And I'm like, 40? We did 181 in a year.
Yeah.
We went to Europe for 3 months straight, did not come home. And as I point out in the book, there was no internet in 1987. So when you go to Europe for 3 months and you can't email and you can't read Yankee scores or whatever, you feel like you're on the moon. So the book does address the double-edged sword of being on tour, the loneliness and the fatigue. And
were you married you were married at the time?
I was young and single. So
you were young and single, so you were able to be out there that long.
Yeah, right.
What other who else did you meet? I also saw that you did the Amnesty International concert.
Yeah, well, that was a tour that was piggybacked inside of our year. And we did like our summer, we did South America, then we did the US winter tour, then we went to Europe for 3 months, then we came back and did the US summer tour, and then 2 days after it ended, I was in London starting the Amnesty tour for 6 weeks. That
was an actual tour. I didn't realize there was a tour. I remember seeing on TV or whatever. I thought it was one date. It was really a tour.
It was a world tour.
Right.
And the previous Amnesty tour was called Conspiracy of Hope. I think they did 6 cities, but we did the whole world. I ended up playing in Africa and India, and that's what I tell people. You're lucky if you get to do a tour with anybody that's got a hit record, right? But not only did I get to tour with one of the greatest icons of rock music, in my opinion, Sting, because we did the Amnesty tour, I got to see Africa, I got to see India. It was an amazing, we went to places that, typical rock tours just don't go. Yeah. We tried to go to China and Russia, but it was back in the 80s and they wouldn't let you in. Of course, now everybody plays China and Russia, but at the time they wouldn't even let us in. I mean, when I was on tour, the Berlin Wall was still up. So the world was a different place. But yeah, the Amnesty tour, it was great. It was Sting's band, Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, Peter Gabriel's band, which was amazing, Tracy Chapman, who was a big star at that point in time, and a Senegalese artist named Youssou N'Dour.
Sure. So, I love him. Yeah. 5
bands all on a jumbo jet going around the world and playing an 8-hour show, in crazy places. And so I tell people, it's like, I was in Africa hanging out with Bruce Springsteen. Who gets to say that,
Right. Did you get to play with did they have you sit in at all? Did you play with any of the other?
Well, I just sent the book. There was a lot of mixing and matching on the tour, but I was too meek to kind of, I wanted to be asked, and that wasn't going to happen. I did sit in with the E Street Band on the last show of the tour. So I got to be an honorary E Street member for Twist and Shout. We did about a 30-minute version of Twist and Shout. And it, as I say in my book, as musical moments go, it wasn't very much. But as lifetime achievements, I was in heaven, Yeah. There I'm on stage in Argentina and Buenos Aires in front of 65,000 fans with Bruce Springsteen, Nils Lofgren, Clarence Clemens. It was amazing.
Yeah, incredible. Obviously, everybody could read that or hear it on your audio book. Mm-hmm. So we'll plug that again. But so now you mentioned the fallout. So during this time that you recollected all this, did you have any idea that you might be writing a book at all?
I had no idea.
No idea. So how did you remembered it? Did you take notes? Did you have a diary? Or it was just free for all and remembering everything?
A lot of remembering. Thank God the internet was there to confirm some of my memory or wrong memories. I would go, oh, wait a minute, that didn't happen that way. It's funny how we remember stuff. And, but I had gone through and I have all my itineraries from that tour, which is one of my most prized possessions. And I decided I wanted to scan them, to digitize each page of this 181 show tour. You know, it's got the hotel information, you know, the flight information. And as I was scanning it, and I was going, wow, that was a wild thing. And I, you know, the anecdotes I'd told over the years at cocktail parties and over dinners. And one time I was talking to a friend of mine and I told him an anecdote from Europe. And he said, and this is a childhood friend of mine. He said, wow, you've never told me that story. You really need to write this down. And I started thinking, oh, maybe I will. So when I started out writing the book, I had never written, never taken a journalism class, never taken an English class to speak of. So I didn't know what I was doing. And the first draft took me about, I guess, 5 or 6 months. And then when I read the first draft, I told my wife, I said, this has all the charm of a grocery list. This is horrible. So then I rolled up my sleeves and started editing and spent about 4 more years editing it. Wow. And people say, you're a great writer. I go, I'm like a dog with a bone. It's like I wanted it to sound right, so I kept working on it. So again, it took me, not only did it take me that long to write it, but somebody said to me, I wish you'd written this book 20 years ago. I said, I didn't understand it. Excuse me. I didn't understand it 20 years ago. Yeah. It took me that much perspective to really understand what had happened to me, you know. And
so let's talk about after. So the tour ends, what happens and where do you go? Because I know you do also have a great history on Broadway. So I'd like to touch a little bit about that as well.
Well, I came back from the tour, as I say in my book, you know, completely confident that I would now have lifetime membership in Club Rockstar. That's not the way it works. I mentioned in the book, I said, I learned that King of the Hill is not a tenured position. And so I came back, had a pile of money, was single, unemployed, partying. I had a studio apartment in Hell's Kitchen, partying round the clock, turning down little gigs at bars. And I wasn't going to do club dates. These gigs are beneath me, right? So I think I'll just wait for the next big call, you know, and I did that for a couple of years. And my life kind of spun out of control. And I finally got to the point that I was out of money. I had spent up all the money I'd earned. And I was like, wow, I got to start all over again. Wow. So, and through this time, my drinking had gotten more and more out of control. So I was drinking heavily, drugging a little bit, but mainly drinking. And that was always my drug of choice. And in New York, if you like to do that, you know, the bars open at 8 a.m. here. So it's easy to spin out. So, but after a couple of years of the Sting tour, I went back and started doing club dates with the exact same club date band I was doing before. Tell the story in my book where Sting hired me on a Thursday and I had a club date booked that Saturday in Yonkers. So I called the club date office Friday morning and said, hey, I got the Sting gig. I'm not going to be there tomorrow. And they said, yes, you are. So I actually have one day in my life where I played with Sting in the morning and the afternoon, then put on my tux and went to Yonkers and played at the Elks Lodge in Yonkers. And so, and I was almost going to blow off the gig, but I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not professional. So fast forwarding 2 years later, I'm calling the same club date office saying, hey, do you guys need a guitar player? And so they rehired me. So I went back to the club date, the lower end of the club date. I wasn't playing the Fifth Avenue hotels. I was playing catering halls in the Bronx and Brooklyn, Staten Island, Long Island.
Very, very humbling.
It was.
You know, I learned that too. I remember when I used to do club dates and I was also on Broadway and then sometimes I had to go to Brooklyn. I had to take the subway. I had to get a small amp. I had the guitar on my back. But, you know, I always learned the same thing as you're kind of saying. It's humbling. And I just thank God I still have my guitar on my shoulder and I'm going to work.
Well,
you know what I mean? And that's the way you're going to have your highs, you're going to have your lows. But if you have your integrity and be humble about it, you'll get through all that.
Well, and I was determined, you know, there was no way I was going to just retire. I was 29 years old at the time when the Sting tour ended. I can't retire at 29, even though I'd maybe had the highlight of my career. And looking back, you know, 33 years later, it still is the highlight of my career in a lot of ways. But at the time, and I talk about it in my book, you know, maybe I would have done a better job if I had struggled in New York for a few years, then gotten the Sting gig. But as I was saying in the book, you know, it's like, that's not the way fate works. You know, opportunity knocks when it pleases. And, you know, did the Sting gig happen too early? Maybe. But I would choose early over never for sure. So I feel like the rookie that won the Super Bowl or the World Series his first season and thought, oh, this is easy. Then you never really get back to the Super Bowl and you go, wow, that was a special season.
Yeah.
But, you know, when they put you in the ground at the end of your life and they say Super Bowl champion or Oscar award winner, they don't put an asterisk beside it and say what year you won the Super Bowl or what year you won your Oscar. You did it. And now with enough perspective, I couldn't be happier. It's like it happened.
So you came back to the city and then eventually you ended up on Broadway. Is that?
Well, I club date and hustled and tried to do jingles and indie records and auditioning for other big tours, Hall & Oates, Lisa Loeb, things like that, but I never got the gig.
Wow.
And so I hustled. And in that time, I met my wife. I got sober. And then once I got sober, things really started turning around. And I was really focused and hustled for about 10 years. And then, about 7 or 8 years into it, I started subbing on Broadway because I was just looking for any work I could find. And I live in Hell's Kitchen, so Broadway is a great commute, which I discuss in my book. But it's like, I still live on 49th Street. So as my friends are, you know, every time I walk into a Broadway pit and the guys are lamenting parking or the tunnel or the bridge, they'll joke, they'll say, Jeff, how was your commute?
Yeah.
It said, don't walk at 9th Avenue. You know, it's great if you live in this neighborhood. And I was here when it was a bad neighborhood full of crackheads and prostitutes. So I've weathered the storm, my wife and I. So now working on Broadway is great for me. It's just so easy. But I started subbing on Broadway and subbed for a couple of years, and which is a meat grinder, subbing on Broadway. But it's how you break into it. And I eventually got a shot with Saturday Night Fever. I did that. And then I got a call from John Miller, asked me if I was interested in Seussical. So I quit Saturday Night Fever. I was enjoying the Bee Gees, playing on the Bee Gees and Kool and the Gang, all those tunes. It was great. We had a full horn section, Chris Barker on drums, Francisco Santana on bass. We had a great band. I didn't want to leave, but my wife and I were talking, and at the time, Seussical was going to be the next big thing, you know, and John Miller said to me, he says, this thing's going to run 10 years minimum. It was me and Jack Caveri and Warren Oates. We had a blast, but it was a total flop. Miller said 10 years minimum, it ran 6 months.
Right.
And so I was like, wow, because I thought Seussical was going to be money in the bank.
And was Saturday Night Fever still playing?
No, it had closed.
Oh,
so
okay.
Mathematically, I made the right move.
Right. Okay. Well, and then you're a Broadway guy, of course. Now you're in tight with one of the top music coordinators, the contractors.
Right.
So hopefully he give you other work.
Right. And this is I'll try to tell the story quickly, but it's another one of those, boy, the angels were looking over me. So as Seussical is bleeding out at the Richard Rodgers Theater, David Holsenberg, the musical director of the show, he pulls me aside and says, I'm getting ready to do a musical based on the music of ABBA. Would you be interested in joining me? And I'm like, I don't know, ABBA? Yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah.
So, which of course was Mamma Mia. And at the same time, John Miller says, I've found a show for you. It's called Thou Shalt Not. It's got directed by Susan Stroman. Harry Connick Jr. is the star. And my brother is a musician, and he had toured with Harry Connick Jr., so I knew Harry a little bit. And I thought, Mamma Mia, they couldn't guarantee me the gig. Miller said, you can have the Thou Shalt Not gig. So I decided I was going to take Thou Shalt Not instead of waiting to find out about Mamma Mia. And so the moment, I'm not exaggerating, I was calling Miller to accept Thou Shalt Not. I thought, well, I'll keep Miller happy. I'll work with him some more. The phone rings from Michael Keller, who was the contractor on Mamma Mia. And he's in Chicago, and he says, you can have the Mamma Mia gig. So I took that instead of Thou Shalt Not. Thou Shalt Not, I think, ran about 6 months. And my wife went to see, and I said, oh, find out who's playing guitar. And she comes home with the playbill, no guitar. They'd even cut the guitar chair. So the show that I was going to take was a flop with no guitar. instead I took the Mamma Mia. It ran 14 years on Broadway. And as I say to all my music, my non-musical friends say, didn't you get bored? And I always say, you have no idea how hard it is to make a steady paycheck in the music business. There's nothing boring about getting paid every week. And Mamma Mia, do the math. A weekly check for 14 years. It changed my life. As much as Sting's endorsement of me changed my life, but really, if you look at it financially, Mamma Mia was the thing that took me from struggling artist to a middle-class citizen,
Right. Well, of course, and we're lucky to have our musicians union. So, of course,
our pension, whatever it may be.
Well, it is what it is, and it builds up a nice pension for retirement after, and hopefully we still get the pension. They didn't cut it so bad yet, but we're still waiting on that. So you did Mamma Mia, which was also a great show, with a good friend of mine, Ray Marchica, on drums.
Right.
I probably know a lot of the other guys in the band as well.
Paul Adamy on bass.
Yeah.
Miles Chase on keyboards.
Yeah, Miles, of course. So the other point that you bring up for our audience is to play a show every night for 14 years. Of course, you get to take off. You still have to be on the money. You have to make that show as a guitar player, as a musician in that orchestra. You have to make that show like it's the recording that day. You can't slack off. So it is a fine, I don't know how to say, but it's very important how you have to work to not be bored, not to let your professionalism down, and to keep at the highest level every night.
Well, and as my wife likes to say, there's dog people and there's cat people. There's people that can play Broadway and there's people that can't. I have some very talented friends that would slit their wrists if they played Broadway every night. They'd much rather be on the road or, being spontaneous and creative. And I had this revelation a few years ago. I was playing on a gig. I used to do this corporate gig where it was the sidemen of the stars would go and play these classic rock gigs for law firms or whatever. There was guys from Billy Joel's band, guys from Bon Jovi's band, Saturday Night Live band. And we were on stage one night and I was looking around and these guys were jumping around and singing and, falling to their knees and playing. And I thought, and I just had this epiphany where I was like, these guys are cowboys. They are coming into town and shooting up the town and going into the saloon. And I thought, I'm a sheriff. I really like law and order. That's my thing. So Broadway is a perfect fit for my type A personality of getting things right and playing them, and no surprises, as a friend of mine calls it, the chaos of live music. When you're playing a live gig, there's a lot of chaos on stage, which some people see as a positive, the spontaneity that's occurring. I kind of like the known quantity of Broadway. That's why I think I flourish in the recording studio as a producer or a player, or Broadway. I can play the same thing over and over and over and not lose the joy in playing it. Some people don't like that. For whatever reason, I like that quality. And I saw an interview one time with Daryl Jones, and he was talking about the Herbie Hancock tour. And he was talking about the guitar player, Wah Wah Watson. And he said, Wah Wah, there was this one tune, he said, Wah Wah played the exact same solo every night. He said, but he just played it better every night.
Yeah.
And so that's my attitude when I'm playing Broadway. Okay, let's play it better than we did last night.
Yeah, there was an interview with Quincy Jones talking about Michael Jackson, because obviously there's ways to produce where it's live and a lot of that, where Quincy says you do it over and over until it's in your blood. Mm-hmm. And then it comes out even more natural. And Michael says on that same interview, he does it. He says, oh, that's great. That's a take. But can you give us one more? Sure. So there are different schools of, one take wonder, or actually, putting it into your whole soul and your whole body plays that lick exactly right.
Well,
and
I talk about
better every night.
It's funny when you're in a long-running Broadway show, or even any Broadway show where the band plays the same songs every night, the regular guys get this telepathy going between them. And I always say we know where the secret passages are.
Yeah.
You can bring in two subs that are maybe better musicians than the guy holding the chair. Certainly in my case, I've always subscribed to get subs better than me so the conductor's happy. So, so you look around the room and you go, wow, this is an incredible lineup of musicians. Well, it's like a ball team. It's not gelling the same way. So there's something to be said for doing it over and over and over. And if you've played a Broadway show, you listen to the actors, they're saying the same words every night, but you hear them toying with things and pushing things and trying things. And I kind of think it's fun to stay within those parameters, but manipulate the music or the lines and do a little something. If you can make one of your fellow band members smile at you and not get a ugly look from the conductor, then it's a win in my opinion. So.
Well, those are great tips. Well, that brings us up to, obviously now Broadway is dark.
Yeah.
Right? We don't know when the next show is going to happen. A lot of our colleagues that we both know, and of course everybody else, they're out of work. The live musician is out of work. They're starting to open up a little bit. So what's going on with you now? I mean, obviously it's a change from your live stuff. What are you doing now?
Well, I had just started Mrs. Doubtfire when the shutdown occurred. We played 3 previews when the shutdown occurred. So I feel fortunate that in theory, I have a job waiting for me on the other end of this. I also, I've been working on the Michael Jackson musical for a couple of years, done a lot of workshops on it. That's supposed to be coming in as well. So I'm almost certain that I will be employed whenever Broadway reopens. Mm-hmm. So that colors my approach to this. The first month or two, I was treating it like it was the holidays and eating every cookie and cupcake and in sight, like Christmas time or something, And all of a sudden I realized this is not the holidays. So I tried to tighten it back up and get on a bit of a regimen. And so I've really struggled with, is this a sabbatical? Is this a vacation? Is this a trial run at retirement? But what I've been doing, I like to read. So I've just started putting together a library of books. I've always wanted to read that. And I just spend time during the day reading. I've also gone back, binge watched a lot of my favorite shows to rewatch The Sopranos and Mad Men. And so I try to, keep my days full, but after 30 years of hustling, there is no hustle right now. It's, there's nothing to do but wait, So I wear my mask and I, go to the grocery store and then I hang out at home. And as a musician, I've kind of was always isolating anyway. So the physical distancing thing, I was built for this. I'm not that social of an animal anyway. So my life, somebody said to me, your life must be so different. I said, really, it's not very different at all, because even when Broadway's up and running, I'm hanging out at my house, either producing, mixing. I used to have a studio, but I lost that lease. So I do some work from home, not near as much as I did, but I have the capabilities at home to record myself. I did some guitar tracks yesterday for somebody.
Right. So you do have a home studio that you can.
Yeah. I had leased a separate space and had a production studio during the Mamma Mia run, which, bringing that up, I felt very strongly about this. Once it became apparent Mamma Mia was going to be a long-running show, I said, okay, I'm going to teach myself how to use Pro Tools, Logic, and little by little, the habit increased to where I had my own studio, a separate space, and started producing artists. I never really struck the jackpot with it, but it was very fulfilling to have a recording studio and produce. And I'm proud of myself that once I saw Mamma Mia was on solid ground, I said to people, and it was the same thing when I started writing my book while Mamma Mia was still running, which is hard for me to believe I did that, but it's that long ago. I looked at it as I've been blessed with a steady job and financial security for Mamma Mia. So I felt like it was incumbent on me in my free time to swing for the fences. People would call me with a gig here and there, and I kept saying to people, with all due respect, I said, I don't really need $200 more. I need $200,000. I'd rather sit in my studio and work on this new young singer's track than come out and play a bar gig. So I really committed myself to my studio and then my book. And I'm at peace with the fact that I might not be, my phone doesn't ring off the hook and I'm not the go-to guy for every gig, but I do feel good that I try to do stuff that was important to me when I had a steady gig.
Yeah.
Because that's what I tell my friends. It's like, once that money's rolling in, that's your time to do whatever your passion is. Whether it's being in a jazz trio or writing a book, because the bills are paid, you know?
Sure, that's great. But you're also, like you said, you hope that you do have a show at the end of the tunnel. If it comes back, you do work with the top contractors in town, and really, really great stories, Jeff. Really.
I feel like one of the luckiest guys I know. I mean, it's just, New York's been very good to me. Whenever people ask me, I've had friends from North Carolina or other places say, should I move to New York? And I go, it's kind of like asking a lottery winner, should I buy a lottery ticket? I mean, my perspective is a little skewed because it really worked out for me. I did stick it out through the tough times. Like I said, between people like to look at my career as, wow, you played Sting and Mamma Mia. I was like, in between those two great gigs was 10 years of some really rough club dates, low paying gigs, lots of hustling, lots of schlepping gear back and forth. So I paid my dues in between Sting and Mamma Mia. But over the whole, New York has been incredibly, I've been very blessed with everything that New York gave me. So it's the smartest thing I ever did, moving to this city, because it did work out for me. I've had some incredible opportunities here because of it.
That's really great. And one of your key things that you said today is always be over-prepared for everything. Be ready for that magical moment when it happens. And
well, and one other thing I talk about in my book, because early in the Sting tour,
give us a summary. Give us end it all together for us.
Well, I would just say that besides being over-prepared, and this is something I talk about, be nice. Play well with others. And I always joke with people, it's kind of hard to go home and practice being nice. You can practice with your metronome, but plays well with others is an important job skill, and early on in the tour, Sting's manager wanted a guitar change. He wanted me gone. And Sting looked at some other people, but he ended up keeping me. And I say in my book, I think it was because I was nice. Sting liked me. And I saw an interview one time with Huey Lewis in the News. His road manager said, I don't care how good you are. If you're a jerk, I don't want you on my bus. Yeah. So these guys that come in, they're a pain in the butt. You're not going to work that much. You have to be, get along with others. And I was talking to I'm sure Warren Oates, and I was talking to Warren one day, and I said, sometimes I wonder, my phone keeps ringing and it kind of surprises me. And he said, Jeff, you bring a positivity to the scene. And I thought, okay, I could deal with that, because there's plenty of cats that play better than me. But so I would say to people, prepare and try to be positive,
It's great tip. And I did a quarantine interview with Warren.
Oh yeah. Oh, I need to check that one out.
Check that out.
He's a wise man.
Yeah, he's a great drummer and also a great person and great guy. So Jeff, I like to wrap it up. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. I'm sure our viewers are really going to enjoy this and also get some valuable tips of how to be successful and also how to live life and love life as you're doing it.
Well, I just finished listening to James Taylor's audiobook, and it's like, I think we think that successful people were born successful, and they're not. They work hard and they catch a lucky break. And so, that's what I tell people all the time. It's the man in the arena. Just try. You can't really control success or failure that much, but you show up, try to have a good attitude and see what happens,
Well, going back to Sting, you ever read the book, The Outlier?
Yeah, absolutely. Malcolm Gladwell.
Sting is an outlier.
Yeah.
Like they say, they're overnight sensation, but really they put in their 10,000 hours on the road, playing everywhere, every day to get so, tight and in their blood. So, of course, he's one of the most talented individuals, but he put in his work to get there as well.
I highly recommend that book to people, Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers.
Great.
It talks about what you control and what you don't control.
Yeah.
And that's what I always say. The outliers are people like Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, Prince, Stevie Wonder, because these guys are talented and they understand work ethic. And I would put Sting on that list. And when you bring talent and work ethic together, that's when you get these special people. But it is interesting in the book where he talks about Bill Gates as a child. His next door neighbor worked for Hewlett-Packard and brought home computer parts for him to play with.
Right, and they were in the basement of their school on the giant computer,
Right.
building computers when they were kids.
Right. So you have to be, life has to throw you some bones. Bill Gates didn't control who his next door neighbor was. I didn't control Delmar's guitar player quitting bush rock, so Delmar would need me, which put me in front of Sting in a dive bar in Italy. So, like I said, you show up and do the work and hope that you catch some breaks along the way. Outliers is a great book.
Great book. It talks about the Beatles also. They played every club in in Liverpool and that. So by the time they got on the Ed Sullivan Show, it seemed like overnight sensation, but they put in their 10,000 hours also.
Saying that just somebody the other day. Everybody's always an overnight success, and it never happens that way.
Yeah.
So a great quote that said, you have to be prepared to work without applause. You have to put in the work at home or in your studio or whatever for the big gigs. You can't wait for the big gig to get your act together. You have to, another great quote that I read, I think L.A. Reid had said it when I saw it. He said, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So
Great tips. Jeffrey Lee Campbell. I want to say I really, really enjoyed this interview. Really great to actually meet you and speak with you. I know of you for many years, and it's really terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So once again, this interview was with guitarist Jeffrey Lee Campbell, Sting's guitarist on Nothing But the Sun tour. He does have his book out now, which it's a must read, a must listen to on audiobooks. Do Stand So Close, My Improbable Adventure as Sting's Guitarist. I said it right this time.
That's right.
Right. Really great.
Yeah.
Great to know you. Great person and all that. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
So I am Alan Cohen, and this is the Quarantine Interviews.